Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of True North Update, your Friday wrap-up of everything that's happened in the wonderful world of Canadian politics and beyond. I am Andrew Lawton, once again filling in for Candace Malcolm.
And I am Sam Eskenasi, filling in, I guess, for Andrew.
Yeah, even though I'm here, it's weird how that works
Yeah.
out. But in any case, thanks very much, Sam, for doing this again. Last week, you were deep hidden in the bowels of the forest, and I was holed up in a hotel room in Calgary. So we're back on our home turf or home court advantage this week, which is good.
That's right. No more true north for me. Now I'm in the regular. I guess I'm north of Toronto. I don't know if that counts as true north enough, but back in the city.
It certainly doesn't count as rugged wilderness, that's for sure.
No.
And I'm back in London, Ontario. So yeah, we're about as anti-wilderness as it gets in the heart of suburbia. But in any case, we are still speaking and representing to all Canadians, or at least endeavoring to do so. We've got a lot to get through today. We're going to be talking about the latest in the federal government and provincial government of Nova Scotia's inquiry into April's Nova Scotia attack. We're also going to be speaking later on about the latest developments in the WE scandal, the committee, the RCMP investigation, Bill Morneau, Justin Trudeau, all of these things, and also a border crossing story that we'll get to. But let's actually start off on WE, because this is, from a conservative politics perspective, the gift that keeps on giving, because it's not like a lot of other scandals, even to the SNC-Lavalin affair to some extent, where once the big story comes out, there isn't really much that happens with it. I know with SNC we had some developments and we got a bit more detail, but ultimately the longer the story went on, things just faded because nothing new was happening. Whereas with WE, every day it seems like things get worse for WE, worse for the Liberals. We add in another player from cabinet, and even now we're 3 weeks into it, and it still is ballooning and growing in controversy.
Yeah, this story is like an onion. It has so many layers, and it's just as smelly. Every time you think you're done with the shenanigans, then there's some new revelation. And now the blame, I'm sure we'll get into that, but the finger pointing now is actually more of a sideshow entertainment story than even the original WE scandal, because it's just ridiculous to see people turning on themselves and throwing other people under the bus.
Yeah, and we to some extent tried to throw Bill Morneau under the bus this week. The big story, I think, was Bill Morneau forgetting to have repaid the $41,000 in travel for a trip that he and his wife took on WE's behalf, or two trips rather, in 2017. So 3 years ago, he was elected. He was finance minister. And the fact that two trips for two people cost $41,000 in the first place when a charity was involved is, I think, a big problem here. And then you get the other aspect of this that he had just forgotten until conveniently the day he testified before the finance committee that he hadn't repaid it. And then the big marker here came when we put out a statement the very same day saying this was never meant to be reimbursed. It was a free trip. Their statement was basically that they were inviting him for all of these reasons. They said, oh, he's a philanthropist and this and that. No, he was a senior cabinet minister, and you can't separate that from his identity, whatever else he's done from his career. So he's repaid it anyway. But this was very much about trying to avoid yet another WE conflict in the Trudeau government. It wasn't about him actually believing clearly like he had just been borrowing some money from WE.
Well, that's the thing. There are rules if you are a minister, if you're a member of parliament. It's not... I can accept that there might be no wrongdoing in a lot of cases, but you have to prevent against the appearance of wrongdoing, and that's why a lot of these rules are in place. So if you're going to go for some reason to see what WE is doing in other countries, you want to see their good works, okay, fine, I guess. But, why do they need to pay $41,000 for you and your wife to come on a trip? Even the fact that he's bringing his wife, to be honest, I've met people on the finance committee. They're going to Yellowknife. They're going all over the place to do these meetings, and they're not bringing their spouses. They're not going for a pleasure trip. It's just to go get there and do the business. And fine, you might have fun. I understand that's maybe some of the perks of the job. Some people like travel. You get to travel. But this is not a job perk, and it should not be a job perk to get a $41,000 vacation for your wife and yourself.
No, and we looked at the controversy with Justin Trudeau's first ethics violation, the trip he took to the Aga Khan's private island, and what really sunk him was that there was a specific ban on accepting air travel, and not disclosing it, and it was the helicopter trip to get to the private island. That was, I think, the real linchpin of Justin Trudeau's plans, where he very clearly violated by the letter and spirit of the law the code for ministers of the crown, of which the prime minister is one. So here we're talking about an entire trip, not just a little helicopter jaunt from one island to the other, which is bad enough, but an entire trip, 2 trips, familial advantage, personal advantage from a group that does business with the government. How does this not come across in any definition as being a conflict, as being ethically wrong, as being legally wrong? Not to mention, I think, the moral aspect here of, when you're a minister, of taking this, which was clearly intended to be a gift. When the repayment of it doesn't come about for another 3 years, it was a gift. It was not something that was just brokered. Has many different layers to it. It's been called a shell corporation. It's not a travel agency.
Definitely not a travel agency. And that's the real difference for me in this case. It's not just the fact that he is getting money. It's the fact that he's a minister of the crown, and the fact that we is getting money from the government. It's not a pocketbook. It's not a separate bucket of money. So if I apply for a grant and I got $100,000, and then I took some members of parliament who, even if they're not connected to me getting that grant, I took some members of parliament to dinner. Well, where did my organization get any money? If one of my main sources is the government, then you can say, well, it's really just flowing through me. You might as well have the government buy them dinner. And even if it's not the main source of income, it's still, again, a question. Well, without that government income, would they have been able to drop $41,000? I mean, there were rumors that they were in financial trouble to begin with. And so the flow-through effect, which is basically what it comes down to. And again, this is the appearance. Even if someone, maybe you had a private donor that wanted to donate this, so many appearances, so many wrongdoings, people really should check their head. And that's a trend with this government is what are you thinking, right? What are you thinking? You should know better. You are the people who harped on the previous government about accountability, about transparency, and here you are. Where's the accountability? Where's the transparency?
Yeah, and I never like making everything a comparison game and turning everything into a question of, oh, well, what if Harper had done this and what if Harper had done this? But, I'm also remiss to not point out that is a very illuminating thought experiment when you do that, because, the famous example of a gross ethical violation that everyone will remember until the end of time is a $16 glass of orange juice at the Savoy Hotel. That's the downfall of Bevota, the $16 glass of orange juice. And, in a lot of ways, I think from a political communications perspective, people can relate to a $16 glass of orange juice because they know that's not what orange juice costs. People can't really relate to millions and billions as much because these numbers are so abstract. And that's why if you're trying to attack someone, latching on to those things is more important. I mean, the fact is Bevota spent a lot of money on that trip. There were a lot of expenses that shouldn't have been on there, but that's the one that everyone remembers.
Yeah.
And when you look at here we are, $41,000, 2 vacations, family. This is something that people, I think, understand. This is something that is not abstract. People get it. People get that, hey, most families' vacations don't cost that. And if they do, most people aren't getting them from an organization that's getting government contracts.
And again, that's the entire thing. It's the organization is getting government contracts. He is the finance minister, and now he's saying he's sorry. But it's not even, I'm sorry. I don't know how you forget to pay $41,000 of travel, how you don't realize that this is a thing that you should not be doing. I mean, I think we spoke about this previously or just, maybe not online, but in general, they get this stuff drilled into them. They get the, bejesus scared out of them of these ethics violations by the bureaucracy, by some of the people that give them training when they get elected to prevent such things from happening. And so, at this point, you really got to wonder, is it on purpose? They just don't care. They have, no regard for the rules. They think they're above them. I mean, he's a rich guy. The prime minister also was a previously rich and influential guy even before. So, maybe they just don't care. Is that what it is? They just don't care?
Yeah, I mean, we've known, and I think I mentioned this on a previous show, that Justin Trudeau seems to be surrounded by sycophants, people for whom he can do no wrong. And I think that's why there is such an ethical blind spot. And I'm not one of these eat the rich types like that belong in the socialist wing of the NDP. So I think wealth is something to be encouraged. I think creating wealth is to be encouraged. I think even people that have family money, if they take that and they turn it into something, good on them. I don't begrudge people who are wealthy. But you also have to understand the cultural differences that exist between the uber wealthy and even upper middle class Canadians. But I'm going to say the rest of the country. And I think this is the observation a lot of people have made. Like, imagine being so rich that, you could just forget that you owed someone $41,000 for a couple of trips, and more importantly, come up with that money on a day's notice when you learn that you do owe it, or when you've decided that you want to pay it back. It's as though, like, my friend came up to me and said, "Oh, you owe me $5." You just reach into your pocket and say, "Oh, there you go." Like, you just have it on hand. And again, I don't think it's a problem that Morneau has that, but it does, I think, reinforce what is really the significant underpinning of this, which is just they honestly think there are different rules. I mean, things are a lot more fluid for the elites than they are for most other people in the country and in the Western world, whereas you just kind of hobnob with people, you shake hands, you rub elbows, you have all of these acquaintances that aren't really friends, and maybe you rub each other's backs or pat each other's backs. It's COVID. You can't touch each other's backs, but whatever the case is. And I do think that there's a genuine example of that at play here, where people just don't realize that, oh yeah, this sort of power brokering and influence seeking isn't normal and isn't natural outside of this world.
Well, this is the real privilege, and it's not a race-based privilege. It's a class-based privilege, that if you are among the elite, you're, the top 1%, the upper class, that's the privilege that you have. You have the ability to kind of weave in and around the rules. You have maybe power and influence to use the rules to the maximum advantage. You can leverage things that other people simply have no way to leverage. You have connections. Like, I'm not getting invited to the Aga Khan's Island. I'm not getting invited by we for a $41,000 vacation, even if I had the money, right? Which I don't, but even if I had the money, I'm not getting invited to any of these things. And that's the real thing that people, need to keep in mind. But also it's who are they blaming now? So instead of taking responsibility, actually taking responsibility, maybe someone resigning as people are being called for now, who are they blaming, Andrew? Who are they blaming?
Yeah, I mean, it's always someone else's fault. It's always someone else's responsibility. In this case, it's just an accident. I didn't know. And same as when the Aga Khan Island thing happened. It was, we were just family friends. I didn't think there was an issue. And Bill Morneau's villa, it's, how could I have known? I just forgot. And the thing is, like, smaller things have caused heads to roll. Mm-hmm. Smaller things have caused there to be significant demotions or outright terminations. And at best, even if we're found to have, if Morneau and Trudeau are found to have violated the ethics rules again, what will happen? A slap on the wrist, a $500 fine, and then everyone forgets about it by the time the election rolls around. I'm growing more and more pessimistic of this, which is why I think that we're at the point where the calls for police to investigate are not hyperbolic. I mean, we've looked at breaches of trust. We've looked at potential for, and I don't even want to make make a laundry list of charges here, because no charges have been laid, but a number of areas of criminal law where the Conservatives have pointed out to and said, we think this might fit the bill. At the very least, we think it's worth investigating.
Yeah, and further, I think the extra insult, I was talking to my wife and just a couple friends about this whole thing. The extra insult for me is how they're trying to get away by blaming people. And it's not just people, it's a specific group of people, namely women. And for a prime minister who holds himself up as a super feminist, and, because it's 2015 and, cabinet equality and all these things, you have Jody Wilson-Raybould, a minority woman. You have Jane Philpott. You have Selena Caesar Chavanez. You have Leona Aliseb. You have all these women. And then you're using another woman, Julie Dershowitz. You're using another woman in committee to have Morneau throw another woman, Bardish Chagger, under the bus now for this whole thing. That's just disgusting. I mean, if you pay any attention to what's going on, it has nothing to do with their politics, left wing, right wing. I don't care about that. I care about the fact that these people are holding themselves up as paragons, like literal paragons of equality, calling any other party the worst names in the book. Andrew Scheer took so much flack for attending this event and that event, and he hates women and blah. And yet here's a prime minister who is holding himself up as a super feminist, and this is what he's done. I mean, five women who have problems with this government is not suddenly an oversight. It's not just because, it happens to be a woman. That's a serious problem to me. That's a really red flag, and every woman in this country should be paying attention to what is going on, because this is not how you get women into politics, which Justin Trudeau claims he so badly wants.
Yeah, and I think there is an important aspect of that and an important dynamic of that. I know Catherine McKenna was tweeting, I think it was today, it might have been yesterday, about the need to get more women in politics. And you look at her own Liberal government's treatment of that, her own Prime Minister's treatment of the women that have risen up through the ranks in politics. And, I don't want to say that there is a women being targeted problem, but I certainly don't think that women who stand up to power are being rewarded. And we just see that anyone who has stood up and said no is punished. And that's, I think, a big problem.
Well, this is the original complaint, and it all comes down to the leadership, where the prime minister is, for lack of a better term, he's a dude bro, right? He grew up, he's a dude bro. Right?
What is that? A dude bro?
He's a bro.
Is that one word, hyphenated, 2 words?
It's the same as, allegedly that he said, if I would have known you were a reporter, I never would have groped you.
Okay.
He's a bro. Like, what do you, he's like one of those college, the way it's coming out, he seems like one of those creepy college guys that waits for the girl to have too many drinks. Like, that just seems to be what is going on here. And then it's not surprising that he can have just such a disregard for women. And it almost begs the question, well, are you holding up your feminism to kind of hide your, disregard for women, or your low opinion of women, or the fact that you think you can just do whatever you want because your last name gives you privilege of some kind? It seems to be a culture, and there's a lot of things. There's a culture of not accepting responsibility. There seems to be a culture of disregarding the rules. There seems to be a culture of treating women in such a fashion. And these things very much concern me more than any specific policy prescription or any specific, agenda or something they want to put forward from a political manner, because this speaks to the people themselves that are running the government. I can handle a coherent policy that I disagree with, but I cannot handle people that are not coherent and not consistent, because they can just do anything.
Well said. On that note, what else do we have going on here? Right? We weren't going to go all the day, but then we have started to. So I think we had some other stories. Now I've lost where we were. Oh, here we go. Let's talk about the. Oh no, that's a we story as well. How many pages of we did our producer give us here? Okay, there we go. Nova Scotia shooting. This was in April. Absolutely horrific. 22 people killed. A lot of unanswered questions about this still, even 3 months later. How did the killer get firearms, given that he had no firearms license? How did he get his hands on a police car that was a very convincing replica? We've had some conflicting information about that. How did he fly under the radar despite all of the known instances of violence and threats domestically and also to public safety, the obsession with police officers, a lot of these questions, which is why immediately there were calls for a full and robust public inquiry. 3 months later, the government is not only not doing an inquiry, but they are doing a panel that will not have the public transparency and the deep dive into the records, but rather will be done, much of which cloak and dagger in secret. And this is being presided over by a 3-person panel. And look, I'm glad that they're doing something, but the families of the victims are saying, what the heck is this? I mean, a lot of the information, a lot of the details will not be made public. The records, the total scope of inquiry will not be made public. The final report will be, but the hearings that led to it won't be. No excuse for this type of secrecy.
Yeah, all we got from this was a gun ban, and now we're not going to ever get the information and get to the bottom of what truly happened. I mean, there was a bunch of weird things where the guy withdrew some money. There was a whole bunch of weird questions, and maybe some of them have really legitimate answers. I know we discussed the funds that he picked up, and there was a lot of things that just seemed fishy. I don't understand why you can't make a lot of this public, why you can't make a lot of it transparent, and also the fact that this secrecy just lends to the gun ban that the Liberals decided to take advantage of, because you don't now know what happened. So maybe it turns out that what he did is, there's a really good reason to ban guns, because this is how somehow he got guns. If we don't ban these guns, someone like this can do something again. But maybe it also has nothing to do with it. Maybe the gun ban was just totally at overreach and just totally ridiculous, especially considering that there were anti-tank rockets and surface-to-air missiles on that list. But transparency and truth will allow you to fix the problem. If you cannot look at the truth, you can never fix a problem, because you're not going to be addressing the real problem. And Canadians have a right to know, because these are government bodies. This is the RCMP. This is one of the top law enforcement bodies and agencies in this country. We have a right to know what is going on over there. There should be oversight. Police have tremendous power, and I have no problem with reasonable oversight.
Yeah, and you're right. I mean, the gun ban was something I was very critical of. It was ham-fistedly done just because there was some political cover, given there
Mhm.
was a tragedy. So I think it was very callous. It was very cynical. And more importantly, it was just wrong-headed. At the time that it was put forward, it didn't seem like the guns were legally owned, but we weren't sure. And then we got confirmation from the RCMP that the guns were illegally owned and illegally obtained, which means no gun ban would have stopped what happened. They wouldn't have stopped the man from arming himself. So it was purely just to justify something the Liberals wanted to do already. And I think that there is a danger in not having an inquiry, and that it doesn't really shine a light on any of these other things. When government is going to use a false set of conclusions to justify political action, and that same government is saying we don't need to search for answers in a public way, you can't square those two.
No, and that's really what it is. You cannot ever address a real problem if you're not going to look at the truth. If you want to make up problems and then make up solutions because you have some sort of vision, and that's, I think, what this is. The facts don't fit the Liberal government's vision. They have a vision of what Canada is supposed to be like or what it should be like, and anything that doesn't really agree with that vision gets tossed out. So it could be, some inconvenient fact like people forgetting to pay back money, or people, just committing ethics violations that are just inconsistent with the vision that they want to promote of who they are and who Canada is. Or it's just some vision that Canada is a super peaceful country and we don't need guns, and, your rights be damned if you want to legally own a firearm, because that's not the vision that we have as the the whatever you want to call them, the Ottawa elite, the Laurentian elite, the 401 elite. That's just not the vision that we have.
Yeah, and I would say too that, look, I mean, I don't like the politicization of tragedy. I don't like the politicization of lives that were lost. But Trudeau has really made it so that is required now, because he has politicized it. And to push back against the politics, you have to suspend what should be normal human rules and human decency and civility to fight them on their turf, which is that if they're making it political, fine. Which is why I push back against the gun ban, even though I knew that lives have been lost to gun violence. It wasn't because I wanted to be discussing guns at all. It's because the Liberal government made that the argument.
Well, that's it. You cannot take a specific case and then try and argue the general. You can't say that because this one specific instance, even if literally it was legally owned, he went through all the proper channels and a gun ban would have stopped, even if that's the case, you can't say because of one specific instance, because of one happenstance, then we're now going to change the rules for every single person in society. Now, you can say this is going to spark a debate and this is a conversation we should have. I have zero problem with that. But you cannot use one specific case and say that because this one person did a bad thing, now everyone else's rights be damned.
Yeah, very well said. Let's talk about this federal court ruling that came down this week, the Safe Third Country Agreement, which is the deal between the United States and Canadian governments to not accept refugee claimants who have landed in one country to make a claim in the other, has been found to be in violation of the Charter of Rights and Freedoms by the federal court. The court has given the Canadian government 6 months to rectify this. Now opposition parties are calling for the agreement to be scrapped. In a nutshell, there's a loophole in the Safe Third Country Agreement that says you can't, if you're a refugee that lands in the U.S. or in Canada, you can't make a claim at the other country's official border crossings. The loophole in this is that if you cross at an unofficial crossing, which means illegally, you can make a claim. So this is what made Roxham Road in Quebec basically like the supercharged highway to asylum in Canada, even though many of these people were ineligible because they were in the U.S. So by saying this all of a sudden means that if you're in the U.S. and you decide, we don't like it here, we can just come to Canada, violating the spirit of international asylum. And all of this is to say that this is giving Justin Trudeau a lot of cover right now to stop caring about the border. Yeah, and it's,
I mean, I would be concerned that too many people would, if Trump wins the election, that they would make applications. But on a serious note,
that's been what's happening since 2016, though.
Yeah.
You get people that are worried they're facing deportation in the U.S. and think, Justin Trudeau had tweeted out that welcome to Canada thing a little while ago. Maybe we'll just go there instead. And it doesn't become about finding a safe haven. It becomes about shopping.
Yes, and that's the real issue. I mean, the regular concern was that if you came to the United States because you were being persecuted, legitimate persecution, and I don't know, for some reason your case wasn't going so well, you would come to Canada and try your luck over there. The fear was that if Canada then sent you back to the US would then deport you automatically back to whatever country you were suffering in or being persecuted in. And so then nothing would be served by the fact that people can apply for asylum or people can apply as refugees. But that's a very specific concern and something that you can deal with, rather than saying that anyone who applies for asylum or refugee status from the United States, if they cross over from the United States, is just a blanket, we have to accept them as a refugee claimant. That's a very, very different discussion. So again, it's almost like we just spoke about, taking a specific and trying to argue the general, saying that you can never deport anyone back to the United States, versus there might be, on the off chance, some legitimate concern that someone would get deported to another country or become a stateless person with no citizenship, no papers or anything of any kind. Those are very, very specific, perhaps legitimate conversations. This is a very different story.
Yeah, so look, the 6-month window here is, I think, an important one, because it means that Justin Trudeau will have to deal with this, and how he does it stands to be seen. What I would love to see is the federal government appeal this and say, well, actually, no, we think this is a terrible decision. We're going to bring this up to the Federal Court of Appeal, perhaps to the Supreme Court of Canada. That's what I would like to see. But if the government just says, oh, well, we lost, that means that they've basically taken the political cover from this decision to do what they wanted to do all along, which was basically just keep our border as being a wide open suggestion rather than something that matters.
Well, it's not. It's the refugee system is not supposed to be an immigration stream. It's not supposed to be a way that people come to this country on a regular basis. It's supposed to be for the Vietnamese boat people who suffered persecution, attempts at genocide, things like that. There's a very, very specific reason why someone would be a refugee claimant or an assignment claimant. And those sometimes are, the lines can be blurry from one country to the other. But there are some countries which life may not be great. It may be dangerous. There may be a lot of criminals. There may be, certain countries have maybe, Mexico has, for example, cartel issues in northern Mexico. There's a lot of issues, you read in the news about people getting killed and murdered. Is that the same as a genocide? Is that the same as, a famine? Is that the same as something else? These are discussions that we can have, but to try and make it as what seems to be happening, that the refugee system is now an immigration stream, is very, very different, and you cannot allow the refugee system to be downplayed and have that important role taken away from it and turn it into just another refugee system, another immigration system where people just don't like where they're coming from, and so they're coming to Canada.
Yeah, and I'd be remiss to not point out as well that during this pandemic, Justin Trudeau finally did what people like us have been calling on for quite a while, which is suspend the loophole. So basically make it that even if someone comes across at one of these illegal ports, they're going to just be turned around and sent back into the U.S., which proves that the government had it within its enforcement means to do that. So there are a few options here. I mean, Canada could basically continue to enforce this, appeal it, and if they had the ability to temporarily take that loophole off the table now, I feel like they have some latitude in the future to make some changes on this. I mean, the idea that a country's borders are not within its control is a very dangerous dynamic here. And that's why I think this court decision, just based on precedent alone, is a concerning one. But if the government is going to continue to do what it's done for the pandemic indefinitely, that would be, I think, a net positive.
And this is a line of argument that I never liked, and it was the line where, we're never going to stop 100% of the people from coming over. So there's no point in putting all this attention. Well, we're never going to stop 100% of crime, so we should just not have police, perhaps. It's really, that's the line of argument. Now, on the flip side, there's a question of, you are never going to stop 100% of the people, so how much money do you invest? And again, these are legitimate conversations. People can sneak in. The border is very large. It's a very large border. People can sneak in a lot of places, but are we just going to not invest anything? Well, I don't think so. We have to invest something, and we have to make sure we have robust systems in place to deal with the majority of the problem, and the majority of the problem seems to be solvable.
Yeah, very well said. So we always try to end things on somewhat of a good note here. Now, this one I'm putting with a big asterisk. I'm not sure this first story is what I'd class as a good news story. I didn't put it in here. Tell me what's going on, Sam.
All right, so it looks like MPP Goldie Gamari is on TikTok. She is on fire, making
hang on. Just if you're not from Ontario, an MPP is what we call our MLAs here because we have to be different.
Thank you. So she is an MPP, so a member of the provincial legislature, and she has been making TikToks about masks and a number of other things. I guess she's, getting in with the cool kids, making all those TikToks. I know I have some young kids myself that are all over TikTok, so I guess, I don't know, maybe she's trying to reach out to that audience. But some people liked it, some people didn't like it, some specific people really didn't like it. But I don't know. We spoke about it just before coming on. I'm mixed.
By the way, including one of our own, Devin Drover, who's a True North columnist, is one of those people who I think has probably been the loudest on like the anti-TikTok side of this.
Yeah, look, I'm mixed. I understand the need for trying new things. I could imagine maybe when Twitter was a new thing and Facebook was a new thing, saying like, this is ridiculous. Why are you posting on this, this new thing? Who's reading this? You have like 2 followers. All right, I'm all for trying new things. I don't know. I understand, as you said previously, making light of a situation, but I don't know. I mean, if it's done in good fun, if she's getting out the message, I can handle a little shtick. I can handle a little silliness. I guess I would judge it per video. I'll upvote or downvote her videos accordingly.
Okay, well, let's watch the video first. Let's roll this. Okay, so as you can see there, not just wearing a plague mask, but taking the plague mask onto the floor of the Ontario legislature. Now, I am of the mindset that, look, I have a sense of humor and I make light of things. I mean, there's a reason that my show is called Canada's Most Irreverent Talk Show, a title I've held unchallenged for 7 years now. But I also think that there are certain spaces that are meant to be, for lack of a better term, sacred. And I don't mean that in a spiritual way, but in a way that is steeped in tradition. And I would argue the Ontario legislature is one of those places. So taking a plague mask to make a joke or a mockery of something that is serious onto the floor of the legislature, that's the issue that I have. It's not the TikTok issue. It's where she chose to wear that mask. Maybe I'm just the curmudgeon, though. I don't know.
Who knows? I don't know. Maybe we're both getting up there, and then so it's like that Principal Skinner meme. Am I wrong? No, it's the children who are wrong. So who knows?
Okay, so let's just ask everyone, weigh in the comments. Was this good? Was this bad? Or do you have no clue why we're talking about it? Because I'm on team 3, but like I said, I'm a team player, so it's on our list of stories to talk to. So I did my part. Let's end with a real good news story. You'll be happy to hear this, Devin. We're moving on. A couple ties the knot at the U.S.-Canada border. She's American, he's Canadian, and there's a video clip here from Huffington Post Canada of how they managed to have a wedding despite the border closure. Let's roll this. Now, you can't do that as easily at the U.S.-Mexico border, although there is actually, believe it or not, there is like a little gate. I think it's called like the Gate of Love or the Gate of Hope or something at the U.S.-Mexico border where people do weddings there because they like open it up and you can actually kind of have a cross-border thing. But thankfully, we don't have a protected border in this particular context. So I was glad they were able to do that, get the Canadian side on one and the American side on the other. Love knows no borders. Love knows no pandemics.
No, and it was a really touching story because there's so many things that can just get you down these days. You go on Twitter, you go online, you see so many things that are depressing. You kind of, as things are opening back up, you might miss doing some of the things you used to do, and it's very easy to be down these days. And it's really nice to see two people who found love, who found each other, and they're able to get married as best as possible given the circumstances. But it is really a beautiful thing to see two people who love each other get married.
Yeah, I know a lot of people have had to cancel weddings or postpone them a year. I know of a few people that have done it anyway. I think I've had 4 or 5 friends that have basically done Zoom/Facebook Live weddings. And that was even earlier on in the pandemic before you could have anyone there. I know some people now that have just moved to outdoor weddings and some people that have just delayed them indefinitely. I saw one friend of mine that had like a face mask knitted or crocheted or so. To be honest, I know absolutely nothing about fabric, but made in some fashion to match her veil and dress. And I think my wife was like, my wife would like cancel the wedding altogether unless it could be perfect. So I think had we not been married already, I think she would have been on team. Let's just do it in 2021. But people are adapting.
That's it. Like I said, we need more happiness in the world. It's good for people to be able to find happiness and bring happiness into the world. And that's what I like to see.
And no one wore a plague mask to the wedding.
No, or made a TikTok.
Goldie Gamari wasn't an invited guest, clearly. All right, well, we ended it on a real good note. Thanks to all of you for tuning in, to Phil and Oliver for making things happen in the back end. And, of course, to Sam, thanks very much.
Yeah, thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure.
All right. Well, all is right in the world next week. Candace will be back to her rightful spot hosting. And I am going to put in a plug as well for the Independent Press Gallery Conservative Leadership Debate, which I will be moderating. Candace will be hosting, and Sam will be playing a great role doing the pre-show and post-show commentary. We fired Ben Mulrooney. He was our original red carpet guy. And now it's going to be True North's own Sam Eskenasi. So that's going to be next Wednesday. Pre-show starts, I think it's like 6:45 or something. But tune in. We'll have all the details for you in the days to come. That's it for us. Thank you. God bless and good day, Canada.